and hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you as always to the team at PebblePad for this opportunity to share my work with you. This is the very first time I'm launching the Fire Up framework outside of my PhD research, and hence the imagery there with the Apollo 13 actually launching. I do want to acknowledge up front though that while Fire Up is an acronym, I also chose the terminology intentionally because I really wanted to capture this idea of being fired up, being passionate, and always looking for opportunities to reinvigorate and enhance what we do so that we are simultaneously reinvigorating and enhancing the student experience. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work and where this work was created, and that's the Kombumerri people of the wider Yugambeh language region. I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. There's a scene in Apollo 13, which of course depicts real life events, and they've realised that the oxygen levels in the spacecraft are being compromised. And back at mission control, the engineer comes into the room and says to the team, you know, we got to find a way to make this square filter fit into this round receptacle using nothing but that. And it's the random material that is available to the astronauts in the spacecraft. And while I don't in any way compare my research to this life or death example, up front, this might have seemed like an impossible task. And in the same way, when we're looking at employability-based learning, the idea of whether or not we can actually achieve both scalability from the institution's perspective and personalisation for students can present as similarly impossible. Part of that, of course, is that we are experiencing some quite significant challenges in the higher education sector, and I'm sure many of you are across what those challenges are, and you're probably experiencing them to some extent yourselves. Some scholars have referred to this as producing what they're calling academic zombies, or teaching teams who are simply overburdened with the amount of work that's required to continue to deliver these quality experiences for students. And we know in all learning that meaningful feedback is important, particularly in employability-based learning, where students are obviously dealing with highly personalised contexts. And while it's time-consuming, it is absolutely imperative. When talking about scale, I need to just clarify that I'm speaking here more than just increasing numbers. So, you know, we could say about an initiative, for example, that, hey, we had 50 students turn up in the first instance, and next time we ran it, we had 250 students. So yay, we've achieved scale. And of course, if the student experience of that initiative was diminished or compromised in any way because there were more students participating, then that's not scale. That's just an increase in numbers. So in order to achieve scale, the quality needs to be sustained or even enhanced. Perhaps student achievement is increased, so students might progress further into a program or achieve to higher levels. There might be increased depth. They might need to do more things or have a range of different kinds of experiences within the initiative, or we could increase breadth, where we're able to open up that opportunity to students from different disciplines or different kinds of cohorts. We know, of course, that students themselves are experiencing challenges and that creates some significant pressures, particularly on their time. So when it comes to employability-based learning, we absolutely need to acknowledge that there are different start points for employability. So if a student turns up to an event and they feel like we're not meeting them where they are in terms of their learning journey and their career journey, they're really unlikely to come back for a subsequent event. So we really need to acknowledge this idea that they're bringing diverse experiences with them, and we need to shape their career learning opportunities around those different experiences. Okay, the research. was founded on the conceptual model from the Higher Education Academy, which of course is now Advanced HE. And this is their model for embedding employability within an institution. So specifically, I was focusing on stage 3 and 4 from this model, which is prioritizing actions and measuring impact. The research was centred on Sciences Plus, which also later became known as STEM Professionals, and I'm sure some of you have heard me speaking about this program before. So very briefly, to achieve at bronze, silver and gold level in the Plus program, students were required to attend workshops, and after every workshop, they needed to provide a response, so a reflection or a response to a career development activity. I then provided feedback to those students, so weekly feedback to every student on every response they provided. As they progressed through each of the workshops and achieved to bronze and then silver and gold level, they unlocked different rewards. So at bronze, a certificate and a pineapple pen. At silver, the certificate pen and also a LinkedIn recommendation. And at gold level, they also achieved a digital badge and a letter of recommendation from the Pro-Vice Chancellor. To achieve Gold Plus, they actually needed to produce an industry-aligned portfolio. So there was a real connection between what they were doing in their portfolio and where they anticipated they might go in terms of their future career. When it comes to the idea of the pedagogies of portfolio, I think Paul actually outlined some very similar points to this in the earlier session. So this idea of portfolio to help students create meaning from their broad life experiences in a longitudinal way rather than an episodic way. And the reflective component helps convert what could be fuzzy learning experiences or fuzzy experiences into learning and then into preparedness for work, with that particular focus on transferring skills across contexts. Just a note there too, I know I referenced pedagogies on the previous slide, and I don't in any way anticipate that we're going to change commonplace use of the word pedagogy as a catch-all phrase for, curricular design that's done right. However, in my research, I actually leveraged the adult learning principles, and there were a range of GOGIs there as well. And what I discovered is if you present students with the right structure, they can actually seamlessly move between these different approaches to learning, depending on the concept they're considering and how much guidance they might need from the educator. Okay, so portraiture methodology was the first approach that I took. And so I created these 3 written portraits of 3 student experiences in the Plus program, as it was at the time. And through those portraits, I was able to see that although these students attended the same workshops and responded to the same reflective prompts, they each focused on an area that was most relevant and important for them. So for Nat, it was a focus on establishing connection with industry professionals. For Ben, it was developing a sense of confidence and a sense of self in the IT industry. And for Anne, who is a school leaver student, it was practical application of the ideas from the workshops into concrete career actions. I then looked at an additional 22 students' reflections, so based on what they had written in response to the Plus workshops, and was able to identify these 8 employability-based learning themes. So you note there that the first one is adult learning, and I included it because it captures this idea that students who are given choice and are able to navigate with some sense of control over how they respond to each of these other learning themes are more likely to persist in a career development program. So adult learning actually drives engagement with each of the other themes and activities that might sit within those themes. Claiming personalisation, I did discover lots of evidence that we could certainly claim that students were able to personalise their experience in the Plus program to suit themselves. I definitely don't have time to go through all of those today, so I've just chosen one example. And it's this idea that lots of students wanted to commit to an informational interview. which is hardly surprising because I really emphasize how helpful informational interviews can be in terms of career development. So you might sort of, you might look at it and say, okay, well, if 15 out of the 25 students all said they want to do an informational interview, how is that personalised? But when you actually delve into why they want to do an interview, their motivation to do it, and what they hope the outcome might be, that's where you can actually begin to see this idea of this career action being personalised for each student. Claiming scalability. So I mentioned earlier that one metric might be actually looking at increased student achievement. So you can see here across the course of 2020 to 2024, which is when the research took place, the numbers of students participating in the PLUS program definitely increased, but so did the level of achievement. So more students were completing to higher levels of the program, with 10% out of the total achievements achieving gold in 2020, compared with 18% in 2024. Another way I qualified scale was by assigning this idea of a time per student. So I actually assigned an hour value, if you like, to every single activity that was required to effectively run this program. And this is the 2024 numbers on screen now. So that included the workshop preparation, delivery, weekly feedback on the reflections and activities, feedback on the reward, so resume, cover letter, LinkedIn profile, portfolio, administration of all of those rewards, responding to inquiries, marketing, communication, and delivering a milestone celebration event. So it's quite a comprehensive program. And what that translated to in 2024 was 58 minutes per student. So for just an investment of 1 hour per student, we could deliver this incredibly comprehensive program. That compares with 138 minutes per student in 2020. And I honestly believe that the quality of what students experienced in 2024 was vastly improved. And that is absolutely because of the use of PebblePad. So as I begin to learn more about how to use PebblePad effectively to deliver this program, the quality increased, and therefore we could also increase student achievement levels. And I think that was noted in that previous graph. Okay, so there's a range of research findings. The one that I want to focus on are the digital design elements that enable scalability and personalisation. I've actually left off a word there. And as we go through and have a look at these individual design elements within the PLUS or the STEM Professionals workbook, you might look and you think, oh, okay, there's hardly anything innovative about that, Gayle, like we've all done that. But it is actually the combination of each of these design elements that work together to ensure that we could achieve both scalability and personalisation. And so it's this idea of integrated technological systems that enabled the administration and coupled with the learning design to enhance the student experience of this program. All right, so the first one is checklists as progress dashboards. So this is a screenshot from the very start of the worksheet where students actually recorded all of their responses to the workshop stimuli. And there's an element here that connects with gamified learning, where students can actually, at a glance, see their progress. And they would come into this worksheet and want to see that I had looked at their work, had validated their effort by providing some feedback, and had checked off their progress towards bronze and later silver and gold. This also translated into a mechanism for us to administratively run the program. So we were able to download this data and sort it and filter it appropriately so that we could communicate with students in cohorts depending on where they were up to in terms of their progress through the program. The feedback architecture was incredibly important. So because it was only me providing this weekly feedback to every student in the program, and they were, putting in reflections and career toolkit items and so on a very regular basis, the feedback architecture needed to be completely seamless and very, very easy to use. So the way I did that was to embed these interactive, they're marking rubrics, but in this case, I'd call them an evaluation table, combined with a space to put some personalised feedback, because we know for employability-based learning, that personalisation of feedback is really important. And this created a two-way dialogue with students. And the regular meaningful feedback actually sustained their momentum through the program. And you can see a couple of quotes there that I've taken from my research, where students are commenting that, you know, receiving this weekly feedback really helped motivate them to continue to come back each week. I really enjoyed reading the students' reflections, and I also enjoyed providing feedback for them. But ultimately, I realised that they were writing about the workshop. And while that was great for me to hear what was working and what wasn't working in the workshop, they weren't able to then do anything with that reflection or that activity. And I was providing feedback that they might have looked at and said, oh, isn't that great? You know, Gayle's giving me some good feedback. But they didn't do anything else with it. So I ultimately made changes to what students did following each workshop so that they were able to reuse their reflection later on in their gold portfolio. So I created this idea of these double duty reflections and also double duty feedback. So I was able to provide feedback to students that they could apply to their reflections before featuring them in their portfolio. And once I got to the portfolio, it meant that I was reading polished second versions at the very least, and that I'd already seen much of the students' work. So providing feedback on the portfolio became something that was very streamlined. So it's this idea of maximizing value for busy adults. So that includes the students and me when I was delivering this program. I did create a number of variations in reflective style, and this acknowledges that students don't always have to do full-blown written paragraphs of reflection. You know, sometimes for planning purposes, particularly, using a table like this means that they are not spending time on lots of words, rather they're spending time on their ideas and how they want to implement those ideas. I also use this stimulus response structure throughout the workbook. So that allowed students to respond in real time to some key concepts. It empowered learner-driven engagement with the resources, and it also provided this opportunity for students with different learning styles to actually engage in different ways throughout the workbook. And this is just another example of a planning application, but importantly, it connects the students' ideas with their industry competency framework. So, you know, really providing that future-focused idea for them. I coupled that with the like-it scale, so just another way of validating student effort, providing some quick feedback without necessarily having to be writing full comments all the time. And I used an interactive checklist for the students to really allow for this idea of transparency. And I highlighted for the students where to go back in their previous plus activity to look for those reflections to go into their portfolios. Okay, transferring into other contexts. This is going to go quickly. There's a lot of information on this slide, but this is just setting up where the Fire Up framework came from. So in Plus, there was a learning stimulus, which was the workshop. Students completed a reflective activity where they responded to a direct concept from the workshop, and they were able to choose where they put their attention. I provided feedback on their reflections and their work, and they then drew from that work and the feedback to produce their portfolio, which enabled future-focused or future-oriented activity, including establishing professional networks, articulating their skills, and participating in recruitment processes. Okay, finally, we're there. We're going to launch the Fire Up framework now. Okay, I said it was an acronym. It stands for frequent or regular activity, interactive learning experiences that include two-way feedback dialogues, reflective practice that enables students to actually draw meaning and learning from all of their life experiences, engagement with various communities, so establishing opportunities for them to particularly engage with their industry community, and for academics, it's about uplifting practice. So implementing these ideas to create those innovative new delivery methods to enhance support for students' employability development. And here is the framework. You can see there's a similarity there to the structure of how I ran Plus or STEM professionals. But in this context,
just as a warning.
okay, thank you, Jenny. In this context, this is now setting up for students, for academics rather, or teaching teams, to be able to translate the ideas into different contexts. So rather than specific workshops, it's now career development themes. And if you wanted to apply this for a discipline, there might be disciplinary concepts there that you want students to engage with. There's some sort of response activity. So they reflect or they complete an activity related to those themes and they receive feedback on that activity. Hopefully that activity is also connected to their future career or something that is aligned with industry, something that they can see is going to have value for them later on. It allows them to develop those future-oriented behaviours, and connecting that for students and making it explicit is really important. Whoops, hang on, go forward. And finally, this idea of progressive or iterative recognition of achievement. So I did it with the certificates and the pineapple pens, but in curriculum, you could do it with progressive assessment, or assessment that you know, they work on throughout tutorials and receive that regular feedback and validation of their effort and what they're achieving. So just like fitting a square filter into a round receptacle, when you assemble all the component parts in the right ways, you absolutely can achieve employability-based learning that is both personalised and scalable. Thank you everyone for joining me, and if we've got time, maybe there's a little bit of an opportunity for questions.